May 8th, 0508.
Okay.
Good morning, Shauna and Tom.
Good morning. Tom's on his way.
He said they're ready.
Okay, great.
This call is being recorded.
Good morning, everyone. It's Saturday, October 24th, 2015, and Tom is our moderator today.
Hello, Zari.
Go ahead, Tom.
Thanks. We're just getting started.
Tom there? Yes.
I'm here. Good morning. Welcome, everybody.
The forum is great.
So I'll start out with a quote from Mary Baker Eddy. If the Bible and science and health had the place in schools of learning that physiology occupies, they would revolutionize and reform the world to the power of Christ. That's from No and Yes.
Amen.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if anybody had any comments on that.
Well, we need another revolution, don't we?
Yeah, this kind of revolution.
This kind of revolution.
Mhm.
So in a way, we're all revolutionaries, aren't we?
Yep, that's good.
Yep.
Or we should be. We're called to be.
Okay, so we'll dig into the Bible. Our topic today is Lazarus and the rich man. There are various names for this parable. If anybody wants to throw any of the other names out, that would be great. Okay.
It was a foolish rich man, right?
He was living in his own world.
Well, it kind of begs the first question, doesn't it, Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what kind of person was the rich man? Who wants to tell us about the rich man?
Well, he was wicked. He provided only for himself. And Matthew Henry said Christ would not do him so much honor as to name him. They just called him Dives.
Good point.
So Dives wasn't actually his name, it's just a derivative of Latin meaning rich. So it's not even who he was.
Is totally unaware of people outside of his little luxurious life. Right? He had no time for beggars.
I tell you
He
what's
had no
funny.
time, but was he really unaware?
Probably not. He just didn't care.
Yeah.
I
think he was cruel. Well, I do think that, one can have sort of a closed mind,
He might have been deluded he was on the right path.
Yeah. Just into himself, really. I mean, the fact that he said he fed sumptuously every day My goodness, every day. Sumptuous, I looked up, is costly, expensive, splendid. Probably just into how he looked and all that. No T-shirts there. I mean,
Yeah, he had a wonderful life. He was rich, clothed in purple and fine linen, and as you said, fared sumptuously every day. How wonderful.
Well, what would you say was his chief characteristic?
Selfishness.
pride.
Yes, both.
Self-absorption.
Yes. And what is the adamant error?
Self-love, self-justification.
Self-righteousness, yes. The hard, impenetrable stone.
It really made him cruel.
Made him cruel. And who was saying, was it Linda saying maybe, he didn't know it or he wasn't, how could that be?
Well, he might have been living all the rules of the church that he thought, the human rules, and he might have thought God blessed him with the riches.
Exactly.
Well, he wasn't totally unaware because, when he went to Hades, he asked for Lazarus. So how did he know to ask for Lazarus?
But that was later.
Right, but he must have known who Lazarus was.
Oh, I see your point.
See, I don't think he was ignorant of Lazarus.
Because Lazarus first.
No, he wasn't ignorant of Lazarus, but he was ignorant of his own selfishness.
Yeah, so this tells you what state of mind he was in, because he was aware of Lazarus, but he didn't do anything about it. It wasn't like he was totally ignorant of Lazarus. He was really self-absorbed.
And
Well, we don't see this much in the United States of America, but in most other countries and historically, there have been very strong what we can call caste or class systems. It wasn't even that long ago where even in England, as enlightened as England was, there was the upper class and there were the servants. And that was kind of an accepted way of life in a lot of societies. And I got to believe that it was an accepted way of life in Israel, thousands of years ago, that there was the upper class and they thought that they were better. And then there was the lower class and they thought they weren't as good. And then there were those who rebelled. But this was kind of a social thing. It was a generally accepted division among God's children, and we don't even think about it anymore because it's so wrong. But it wasn't that long ago that a lot of societies accepted it.
well, and this is why, to dig really deeply into his state of thought, because he wasn't ignorant of the need of Lazarus, no, but he was ignorant to his own sins, his own selfishness, yes. And the point being, we apply this to ourselves. Are we ignorant? Are we blind to our attitudes or our selfish ways and think that they're acceptable, just as Linda said, well, it's just the way it is. Maybe you go to church, you do all these things, and so, you're a third or fourth generation Christian Scientist or whatever it is that makes you think you're exempt from loving your neighbor as yourself. His chief characteristic was selfishness. All he thought about was himself, and he thought that was perfectly fine. And so did his brothers. That's a good point Gary brings out. Thank God, America, we don't have a caste system, but we have to be very careful. We have homeless, we have other things, so we must make sure we have compassion. for all of God's children and not into a selfish state.
Exactly, because there's no caste system, but then there's the individual thought that says, well, those people are like that, so that's how, they deserve maybe what they're getting, and I am like this, because, and the people who probably think, well, I was born into such and such society, or such and such family, or I'm a Christian Scientist, like you just said, so.
Absolutely.
So I'm entitled.
Yeah.
I really think that in the U.S. it's not quite as obvious as when you've had generations of kings and queens and dukes, but it's definitely still here, because when I taught skiing, I taught the very wealthy, and I'm telling you, they have everything. They've got several houses, all over the world. I mean, and they're obscene how big they are. And they simply think they're entitled to everything, and they aren't even happy with all that money. And I lived off of that for a couple of years.
Thank you, Mike.
That's a good point.
It is.
This concept of thinking that you're entitled is pretty deadly, isn't it?
Very good.
Because there are wealthy who think they're entitled to their wealth, and then there are those who are poor who think they're entitled to somebody else's wealth. And it's all envy and jealousy and covetous, isn't it?
Yeah, altogether the wrong mind, I guess.
Like Mike said, they're dissatisfied. I think we've seen it numerous times. Those that have, they're happy for a brief while until they get unhappy, and then they want more and want different. And it's an endless stream that'll never stop until you get back to your God, that is, away from your selfishness and to the creator of all creation.
And then there are those who have a lot and give it wisely to others and are happy to do so.
And there are those who don't have much, but know that all that they have comes from God, and they also are happy and blessed
Satisfied.
and satisfied.
Yeah.
Much more so than the rich who think that they're entitled and have this highfalutin attitude about themselves. So it really has nothing to do with the outward circumstances, but what's in your heart.
And I would say that even more than selfishness or self-centeredness, that this rich man was covetous of materiality. He coveted the material things. He loved them more than he loved anything else or anyone else.
It was one thing that came to me when I was preparing, that addiction comes in various forms. It doesn't necessarily mean drugs, alcohol, etc. Some people are addicted to feeling superior to others, having the approval of others in their own class, and they shut out this self-examination and conscience thing that is so vital.
What I think was really interesting in this situation was how he reacted when he saw Lazarus in the bosom of Abraham. He expected him to serve him. He still was on his pride, his ego story. He didn't get over it.
Yeah, he still thought of himself as upper class.
Exactly, and that was painful.
And that's why there was a great gulf, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Well, this discussion is just rich.
Very good.
Yep.
And the class system that Gary described in England, that led up to the Titanic. So, it was the very wealthy, they were better than everybody else, many of them. And
So they went for a ride on this unsinkable ship.
Yeah, we did the first ride.
That's right. That's right.
So, next question is, what kind of person was Lazarus?
humble enough to ask for help.
Long-suffering.
Despised.
And he was definitely prejudiced against by society.
He was godly and faithful, and he did not complain.
Well, how do we know that? I mean, I don't think he complained, but how do we know that?
Well, Matthew Henry said it.
Well, he
Okay,
cried out for help,
excellent.
so.
But I feel that to only expect that you only deserve the crumbs too says something about how he felt about himself.
Yeah, he had a poor self-image, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was a simple guy.
Yeah.
You know, that's fascinating. Yeah, I'm sorry, but go ahead.
Well, he was a simple guy. He had a very kind of a low, image of himself. Maybe he probably didn't know that he was the son of God, and he didn't have dominion over the earth, but he had a pure heart.
When the rich man was calling out to him, it's Father Abraham who answered. Lazarus never spoke up that I could see. And his name means help or assistance of God, Eliezer.
This discussion made me think, because actually, if you look at crumbs, where do crumbs come from? It comes from bread, and bread comes from the Word of God. So maybe he didn't know God, and he thought that the rich man must have known God, because otherwise he wouldn't have been rich. So he was looking for just that little bit of God to lead him higher.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, if you think of bread as the truth, yeah, I guess.
But we do look to people, don't we, for guidance sometimes, or some help, or whatever. Sometimes it can be a little deceiving, can't it? As to, we're tempted to look at certain people for kind of leadership quality. Sometimes we're tempted to look in the wrong direction.
Right, and that idea, just because a person is rich doesn't mean he has leadership qualities, or that he is has any knowledge of God, or anything like that, or that he's better than others, or somehow has done rightly, and that's why he's rich. Doesn't necessarily mean any of those things, and yet some people get confused about that and think that's true, but it's not true. So the chief characteristic of the rich man was selfishness, and of Lazarus was humility, faith of thought.
I don't know if you've ever heard this story before about Charles Dickens, but I remember hearing it, and I just looked it up, and I can read this. It's just a couple of paragraphs. It says, in the fall of 1843, Charles Dickens was in a slump. His last published work was not faring well, and debts were mounting. Overwhelmed with the knowledge that his own father had suffered in debtor's prison and fearing for his own family, writer's block set in, and things gradually went from bad to worse. Sleepless, he took to walking the London streets night after night, hoping to find something to spark his imagination. Several times he came face to face with a side of the city that was hidden from the eyes of most. Everywhere he went during those dark nights, he saw the homeless living in the alleyways, and the children working long hours through the night to help their families make ends meet. While Dickens was aware of the plight of the poor and had in fact written about them in some of his earlier works, these nights had a profound impact on him. He began to realize that he was not the victim here. He, with his relative wealth and power to reach thousands, was in a position to serve those less fortunate than himself.
Thus began the feverish writing of one of Dickens' most famous works, A Christmas Carol. The story of a selfish man obsessed with his own wealth and accumulation, and his subsequent transformation was the story of Dickens' own life. The more he focused on the plight of the impoverished, the more creative he became. His own problems were put into perspective, and after a period of time, completely diminished in comparison to his mission, which was to bring to light the terrible conditions that existed in England and rally those who had the resources to end it. And it goes on to say that every holiday season after the publication of this book, he would do public readings in theaters all over the city, and when he finished reading the story, he would implore theater goers to learn from the character of Scrooge and to find joy and fulfillment into giving to those less fortunate.
That is beautiful. Thank you,
Yeah,
Donna.
it's a lovely story.
It is. I didn't know that, and I do love that story.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did he also write Oliver Twist? I think it's all about, still about the poor. Yeah.
Yeah. That was his motivation, and it was an unselfish motivation, and there again, that's why he did so well. He was guided by...
Yeah, he saw an injustice in society, and he had a higher purpose. What greater? Yeah. What a lovely, what a lovely purpose to have in life.
He was just like Paul. God saw qualities in him that could be used to for society's purposes. He had qualities. He had definitely leadership qualities.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about Dickens.
This also means for us, whatever talents we've been given, to use it to do good.
Yes.
Glorify God.
Exactly.
And what did Mrs. Eddy say? She said, as long as there's even one suffering soul on this earth, our work isn't done, finished. For every one that is saved, there's a rejoicing in heaven. Those who've been brought out of the hell of human thinking, the human mind. But you see how deluded the rich man was. Totally deluded, totally insensitive.
Kind of funny too, because I've mentioned my church, Christian Science Church, that I originally joined, and the belief was that we had a lack of money and we needed money somehow to survive. And then we were offered $1 million for the church and the land, and the whole thing fell apart because people were fighting over the money that we didn't even have yet. And the difference between there and Plainfield, where everything is offered for free, and it just goes to show the truth.
Yes.
Yeah. And the lack is never money. The lack is what?
Love for God.
Love for God and man.
Tell the story, Sharon, about what Mrs. Evans had you put in your purse.
Oh, there's Mrs. Eddy wrote a thing that if you put this statement in your purse, you would always have enough, you would never be without what you needed. And I have it in my purse. I've had it in my purse for good 30 years. And I've always, whenever there's a need, something works out that it's met.
Yeah, and the verse was that life, truth, and love are your supply, or something to that effect. It's God as your supply. And in knowing that, like when you know He's all things, He's everything to you, then your need is met. In various wonderful ways. I mean, Luann just had a wonderful experience. She wants to tell about it, but yeah, she was feeling some lack, and then she got a great big tax refund. I mean, a big tax refund. But she's been living the best to her ability to obey God and to love Him and to do right. And it comes in all kinds of ways.
She's also been given jobs to do
She has.
that pay well.
Yeah, she was concerned because she was, quote, retiring from her prison work. Now she has so much work to do, she doesn't. Starting a pottery shop, and people are asking her to paint beautiful pictures. She's an incredible artist, including myself, who's painted some beautiful things. Do you have any pets or animals that you want paintings of? Luann, and you've seen her work in the Liberator, and you heard the story. She was asked to do work on a wall as a used equipment, but she's rising to each occasion, and all the sense of limitation that she couldn't do it, or she wasn't well enough to do it, or she didn't know how to do it, she didn't have enough money to do it. She's overcome every one, and with complete trust in God. I mean, it's a wonderful example. Because if she had sunk back and just thought, "Oh, I'm a mess. I don't feel well. I can't do anything. I'm retired," well, that's what her experience would have been. But she didn't. She rose out of those beliefs, and it wasn't easy. She had many nights off wrestling. She did it.
We hope you don't mind our talking about you, Luann.
Yeah. I hear her Wednesday night.
Don't mind at all. You're doing very well. Couldn't have said it any better.
Well, it's good news, and it's God-directed.
And it's an example of...
That's why it's a good example for everybody, for all of us.
Putting my trust in God and my complete faith in God. When I left my job, I had left because of a back injury, and I felt maybe I couldn't do any more in life, that I had worked so hard that body just gave out. But God has other plans, I guess, so I'm just listening and following, and every time I listen and hear a command and follow it, the whole back injury thing doesn't seem to be a problem at all, and just going forward, and it's been a wonderful blessing, truly wonderful blessing.
She built a shop almost single-handedly. And here she was told, she wouldn't be able to get out of bed and all this other stuff.
So you have a skill that God wanted you to use. This back thing was just kind of a ruse to get you out of your old job into your better job.
So much for retirement, huh?
It's
No such thing.
It all came at the right time, that's for sure.
That's right. Suzanne, you want to tell that story? George sent me that article about the little boy who didn't want to jump in the water. Do you know the story, Suzanne? Did you?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, George.
Okay. Where's George?
Yeah, where's George? He's the one who he sent me a beautiful article. It was about, I'll just tell it briefly, but, a little boy, and he was being taught how to swim and everything, and he could swim in the shallow end, but when it came to jumping in the deep end, he was absolutely petrified. He just couldn't do it. And his coach was telling him, it's okay, it's okay. Finally, he did it. And the moral of the story is, with your faith, you have to obey God, you have to be obedient, you have to take that first step, even if you're scared to do it. And all the things in the Bible telling you, fear not, I'm with you, don't be afraid. Once the little boy jumped in the water and swam, he realized, hey, everything's fine, I'm okay. And he found a greater freedom than he ever knew before. But he had to take that first step of faith and do it, obedience to God. If you don't do it, you will end up sitting on the sidelines, watching everybody swimming and having a good time, and you're just feeling sorry for yourself. Anyway, so that's a good point. Thank George.
That works for mothers, too. I used to have a class of mothers learning to swim. and when their kids were in the hour before. It was very nice.
Interesting.
Okay.
All right.
Tom, how we doing?
Well, I wanted to say that I thought that was really insightful about the breadcrumbs. Very, very insightful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was Mike. Thank you.
That was Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, Mike, thanks. So, I think there's an interesting lesson from this. Actually, particularly if you think that he was just looking for any little bit of the Word of God, and what that means for all of us. In Psalms 119, it talks about how sweet is the Word of God. And so, as Christians, we will go through trials and tribulations, but they don't really mean anything, because what really means something is the Word of God. So, Lazarus had sores and was hungry and all that, but he sought after the right thing. And so, if we go about our day and we seem to have troubles and whatever, it's it's what are we focusing on? And those troubles are for naught, because what's important is, seeking the Word of God.
Yeah. Very good.
The troubles we go through serve a purpose of forcing us to God. So I'm not sure that I would say they are for naught. They do serve a purpose, if we see the right purpose.
Yeah,
I see that. But, I was kind of thinking that, when we go through troubles, is to think that we're like a failure, or things aren't working out.
You're right. We shouldn't.
We shouldn't be thinking that way, and that's kind of what I meant in a shorthand way. It's like, oh my gosh, I have troubles. Oh, woe is me. My life is miserable, and it's just going down the tubes, and we shouldn't be thinking that way.
You're right. We shouldn't let them get the best.
That's what I meant. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
It's easy to get discouraging. That might be a better way to put it. I have some troubles, and you get very, very, very discouraged. And that's not what we're taught to be.
Yeah, and that I wrote on the forum, to those leaning on the sustaining infinite, today is big with blessing. If you lean on God and take your troubles to Him, your day will be big with blessing. But if you just go down with it, which is what Luann did not do, well, then your troubles just get worse. So fight now.
And your day will not be big with blessing.
Your day will not be big with blessing. No. So meet it now. Don't think, oh, I'll just let all these troubles overtake me today, and maybe next week I'll make an effort to think rightly. I've done that. It doesn't work.
Okay, so we've talked about the rich man and Lazarus quite a bit. Our next question is, who is Father Abraham? And I didn't know, I found this absolutely fascinating. We don't have to read all the verses, but would someone like to read from Matthew 3, just verses 7 to 9? I really found this fascinating.
I'll read.
Just the three verses, 7, 8, and 9.
7, 8, 9, okay. But when he saw many of the Pharisees and Sadducees come to his baptism, he said unto them, O generation of vipers, who hath warned you to flee from the wrath to come? Bring forth, therefore, fruits meet for repentance. And not to say within yourselves, we have Abraham to our father. For I say unto you, that God is able of these stones to raise up children unto Abraham.
So, I find this ultra fascinating, because this was John the Baptist saying this, and I've never really thought about anything John the Baptist said, But what do you think? What do we get out of this?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
I just wanted to say an interesting thing that I read in Tumalo's commentary, which goes back to the practices of the day, was that one of the things that they did in those days was they would burn the wheat stubble at the end of the harvest, get rid of whatever, and then all the poisonous snakes would come squiggling out of there. So that was the analogy for that, the wrath and the poisonous vipers.
Okay, so but God could raise up children of Abraham from stones?
Well, actually, I'd like to quickly read that section from Dumbleow's because it was another fascinating thing that let's see, okay. Why don't you go ahead? I have to find it. I thought I had it well marked here. I'm sorry.
Well, I think there was this general, common, accepted belief that Abraham was literally the father of their nation. That all the Israelites descended from Abraham, and that Abraham was both the human and the kind of spiritual source of the nation of Abraham. That it was his children that, were the parents of their parents.
But Jesus said later on in John, he said, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man that has told you the truth, which I have heard of God. This did not Abraham. And he goes on to say, you are of your father the devil. Ye are of your father the devil.
Exactly. And what Jesus was referring to was the spiritual qualities in Abraham that God that enabled him to be the father of their nation.
John the Baptist at this time. He was saying John the Baptist.
Right. But it wasn't. But a lot of Israelites were taking comfort in the human from the man Abraham.
They kind of had this attitude of entitlement or deserving.
Yeah, they thought that since there was some human linkage, that they were protected, that they were entitled.
That's really, that's really good. I'm sorry, go ahead.
The fourth generation or fifth generation or third generation Christian Scientists, it's easy to feel like you've got some special connection or protection against everything bad in the world because you come from this line of special people, chosen people. And without works, without demonstration, it's the same thing. It's dead. It's dead on arrival.
And the great thing about Abraham was his faith. And if they didn't continue in that, they had nothing.
His obedience.
Yeah, in the glossary, it says Abraham, the glossary definition is fidelity, faith in the divine life, and in the eternal principle of being.
I also read that they believe that Abraham was the father of all those who believe, and he was called the friend of God.
But what has been the result of the third and fourth generation Christian Scientists? I'm asking the question. I'd like to know.
Apathy. I think it's self-deception, really. You're thinking you know, but you don't. You don't even understand, and you're certainly not practicing Christian Science the way Mrs. Eddy taught it or gave it to the world.
The hard-heartedness.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I married a fourth generation. I was a Protestant, and I thought he knew what he was doing, and it turned out he was so arrogant and self-deceiving that I had to end the marriage.
Problem with the third and fourth generation Christian Scientists were back to entitlement. people think about, oh, well, my grandmother had this healing or my great aunt had this healing, but you have to have that healing. I have to have that healing. Otherwise, we're in serious trouble.
Thank you.
We're like the rich man. You know, we were just given the purple robes.
Like somehow it would rub off on you, like this coattail action, you know, just by association. You're with this great church and all these great things have happened and you can just skip along. And it, you know, works for a little while, but then you go flat on your face. I mean, I felt totally in that mindset. I can just do whatever I want. I'm with this awesome group of people. Look at all these great things that have happened. Completely self-delusional. All the way to hell. And fortunately, I got my act together and found this church. But otherwise, just complete and utter self-delusion. I can see it clearly now. I didn't see it clearly then.
It also perpetuates false teaching, and it almost ingrains it.
Is that in your classes?
I think it's cultural. It's in classes. It's in churches and Sunday schools. It's the way they interact with each other. It's in the writings, in the periodicals.
Everything that you guys have said is actually summed up very nicely. I'm sorry I couldn't find it earlier, but what Dumelo says, this insolent spirit is best illustrated by a quotation from the rabbis. The fire of hell, Gehenna, has no powers to consume even the sinners of Israel. They go down only to be frightened and slightly singed for their bad actions. Then comes Abraham, who kept all the precepts of the law, and through his own merit brings them up again.
Thank you. Well, you know, we here, I mean, I haven't had any, in a long time, any contact really, except people that come to me for help with the third and fourth generation Christian Scientists, because we don't go to the churches anymore. So I think it's important that we remember what some of us have come out of and what could be going on. And perhaps, I don't know who said it in the beginning, the apathy of it is what's most frightening, especially when you see what's going on in our world. And it was been said, it might have been Max Dunaway, that the state of the world is the state of the consciousness of Christian Scientists. Why would that be?
Because we're not watching enough.
It's all thought.
Yes.
Beautiful consciousness.
Yes, and we understand how to truly pray, to know the unreality of the matter and also of error. We understand that, and we can pray in a way that can heal the world. But if people are apathetic and asleep and not even doing the watches, well,
guess what?
Yeah, guess what? And you know, Mrs. Eddy has said in Watches, Prayers, and Arguments, I think, that the children of Christian Scientists are the offscouring of the earth. Cruel lie. And that is something that needs to be handled, because that would be the malpractice on those. But it would only happen if you are apathetic, if you are asleep, if you think you're a personal creator who created a child and you are not using your science. You are a sitting duck for a lot of things that are unnecessary and do not have to happen.
You know, we have to go back to the humility, and when you say to people within the movement that we have to do watches, they ask, what is that? What are you talking about? And, you know, there was a time when the Sentinel said, you know, what Jesus said, you know, watch. And it is if people have only remembered what people are, you know, telling them to remember. And this is really, really a problem, because if we're not awake, this apathy will take away everything that we've ever gained.
Yes. not here.
Yeah.
Of course not. But it's like I've told you before, learning Christian Science the way that you talk about it is like learning a language again after one's learned it the wrong way.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult to correct bad grammar when you've learned it the wrong way.
Well, thank you. That's exactly what's in our lesson this week.
That's right.
Where it says, a little bit of paraphrasing, but, be consistent, watching and praying. Ye attain slowly and yield not to discouragement.
Yes. Well, it shows the importance of what we're doing. Keep it up to correct all the misconceptions, to get reprogrammed. Mrs. Evans used to say that a lot. She said it was sometimes harder working with a person coming out of the culture and those from other religions because they needed to be reprogrammed. They had it so ingrained in them the wrong way. And so it's repeating and defeating, and not to get discouraged if you've been taught the wrong way, but to keep at it.
Well, I do like wearing my purple robe, but we're learning a lot, so just tell me, Tom, I think you're wearing your purple robe.
That's a good way to put it.
But it does show the danger of becoming apathetic, of feeling like you don't need to watch, and the result of not watching is that all these second and third generation all these churches, the whole concept to them, it just all deteriorated to material prosperity.
I think the Dixon letter probably covers it the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Dixon letter speaks well. Yeah, because one of the things that Reg Carey kept reminding us of when we were going through our lawsuit was the directors and bosses, they don't know how to handle animal magnetism. They don't know the science.
It goes back to what Linda said. No one's being taught it correctly. And I think a lot of that is due to the suppression of the Carpenter books, which talk about watching, which talk about Mrs. Eddy and understanding her place and who and what she was and how she demonstrated the science. They would have liked to have wiped it off the face of the earth.
And they tried.
And they did everything they could. And I know that I hear all the time, all these people still in the Boston churches have these books now and read them. Well, good, I guess.
And yet they hang on to that organization.
Yeah, who deceived them. Deceived them. Which is something is fundamentally wrong there, but so we will keep watching.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Charlie.
I was a Protestant and then became a Christian Scientist and went to a church. I was really flabbergasted at some of the behavior, but you think they know more than you do. That's what happened.
I know.
You really, and it took a while to see through it. And anyway,
well, that's what happened to me too. I mean, I was an Episcopalian, and I just sort of walked into the Christian Science church because I'd heard about it, and it was near my home. And I began to get the feeling as a few years went by that they knew everything I knew, and I just didn't understand it. And they all seemed so perfect. But eventually it just didn't work. And I went to another church, and that didn't work either. Though I played in the Sunday school, I played the piano. And so I finally just gave up. Until I found Plainfield several years later.
Thank goodness.
Wouldn't it be refreshing to see somebody who really had a problem, but they were working their way through it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I mean, everybody put on this air
Yeah,
because
exactly.
because they would feel so guilty if they ever had a problem.
Yes, that's right.
Because the general feeling was, oh my God, you had a problem and it wouldn't yield. What kind of a person are you?
Wrong to deserve it. Yeah, right.
What? You drink alcohol? You can't join our church. Smoke cigarettes? You
Can't
can't
smoke
join our
and
church.
join.
Yeah, go away, Albert Einstein.
Right.
Perfect.
You're not good enough for us.
That's the sad thing about the third and fourth generation is that they are weak. Despite their appearances, you give them a problem that they actually have to work through. It doesn't yield right away. They fall apart. They're weak.
Can I say something?
If I could just say, the sign of a worker is one that faces something, and if it doesn't yield right away, they keep going. And sometimes it's a long time, keep going.
That is so true. God calls it. Well, I didn't feel any different, so that's it. One day, can't take it.
Yeah, one day, okay, yeah, I don't feel different. I don't want any more help or whatever.
Doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
There's no understanding of Christian Science. I'm sorry. Most people don't understand what Christian Science is all about.
Well, that goes back to what Mrs. Singletary is saying, that I think is really, really important about this censorship of reading materials, and it's really controlling others' minds, which is a very high evil.
It is.
Right.
And it's done very secretively and very manipulatively. This is not a very, nice thing, or, it might be under good intentions, which is even more dangerous. I mean, it's not very evil.
Right. It is the human mind that is trying to humanize the science, and it's trying to keep the church, quote, pure.
Instead, it's rotten.
Exactly.
Because there's no metaphysics to it. It's seeing other people. What are they seeing as? Is it dumb? That we're not going to get it? That I don't know.
Right. You're too stupid to know what's good for you to read or not to read.
Yeah. Which is malpractice from the get-go. But I think it might have started out that way. I'm not sure now. I think it's infiltrated by, probably even worse things going on. Who are definitely out to destroy the whole thing.
Well, I just want to say that as a, growing up in Christian Science, it's really hard to leave the church. From my experience, it took me a long time to do that. And then when I left, I found it, because you associate the church as something founded by Mary Baker Eddy. So if you leave the church, there is no such thing as Christian Science.
Yes.
I mean, I think for a lot of people, it's very difficult to think that through.
Right.
Absolutely it is.
But that's one of the leaps of faith. If you want to learn to swim, that's one of the leaps of faith you have to make. You have to be prepared to leave the church, to leave all for Christ.
Well, I tell you, one of the things that probably is one of the reasons I ended up at Plainfield was, and it wasn't deliberate, but I used to puzzle over this. But after I left, I would sometimes read Science and Health, and I enjoyed reading it. And then other times said, oh, okay, well, maybe I should read some of the literature, and I'd read a journal or Sentinel or whatever. And frankly, I couldn't finish any of the articles, and I'd throw them away, and I didn't understand it. This went on for, it seemed like a few years.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I would not read any of that stuff, but I'd read Science and Health.
We've all
I would too when I was not in the church anymore, when I'd left all those churches. I did continue to read Science and Health, but I needed help. And I thank the Lord for Plainfield having a website.
This kind of speaks to our last question here, which I don't know if you guys want to keep going on this.
Yes,
but
let's do. Go ahead.
I thought the last question really kind of says a lot. I mean, we didn't answer question number 4, but But
Well, in a way, we did. We know what righteousness he sought, which was no righteousness.
but I think question number 5 is worth 5 minutes.
Yes, please.
Okay with you? What does it mean to hear Moses and the prophets?
Well, some of it speaks to what Tom just said. He couldn't read the false literature. He couldn't. Sometimes you don't know why, but it turns you off. I mean, and even, you know, a lot of the articles, well, all of the articles really, written in the journals and sentinels, after at least the 40s, maybe before that. I mean, I would find they were so long, and they might have sounded right, but they would usually either turn me off or put me to sleep.
And I think that's because Moses and the prophets weren't in them.
Yeah, I found in Matthew Henry, it said that you have to listen to the whole Old Testament. And the rich man had failed to pay attention to the scriptures and its teaching. That's what I found.
Yeah,
I was looking at the word hear, and it says, you know, to hear Moses and the prophets, not just like half, but to take it in. And I looked up hearing in the 1828 dictionary, and one of the definitions was to attend, to listen, and to obey.
One thing about Moses and the prophets is that they weren't married to any organization. It was just them and God.
But what does it take to actually hear them?
It'll come with your heart. It's a love for God, for God's laws, God's will, God's ways.
Yeah, you have to start out with an open and a humble heart that's seeking the truth. When I read this question, I thought, blessed are the poor in spirit, those who know that they need God.
It's humility.
Blessed are the meek.
Humility.
Right, because without this is the good soil, isn't it?
Yes.
The good soil, where the seed is sown and it yields fruit. Because without the good soil, if my heart isn't open, I can see miracles before my very eyes, and I'll just shut them out. And we have seen this over and over again. We had a member of a church many years ago killed in an auto accident in the hospital, pronounced dead, and Mrs. Evans went in and brought him back. And the doctors were just dumbfounded. But did they come to church? Did they want to know what healed? Were they interested? No.
It offended them because they couldn't do it. And then, to be honest, the other thing we need is exactly what we're doing today, the Bible lessons and the round tables, because that has so helped my understanding. Everybody brings out such wonderful points and that I couldn't figure out on my own in a million years. So thank you very much.
And be always humble and thinking in your own life. Are you seeing the miracles of God on a daily basis? Are you appreciating what God is doing in your life? Are you grateful for it? Or are you becoming sleepy and apathetic and not watching? It's an ongoing process, and it's certainly your spiritual sense. You should be offended by that which is not the real truth, even though it might be coded in the jargon or in the words of science. It's not the real truth. It should turn you off. Just as little children are so discerning. We should cultivate, as we talked last week about cultivating our spiritual understanding. This is a daily process, and God is speaking, and we mustn't be deceived or put to sleep or put be put apathetic. And a lot of that has to do with just being ungrateful. If you don't see what God is doing, you're not truly grateful, then you'll end up losing it, and you'll take that trip off the path. It's never pleasant. Even in the beginning, it might seem pleasant. It's very enticing, usually in the beginning. But you get farther down the road, and things begin to happen, and you're in a boat without a paddle, so to speak.
And that's why Father Abraham refused to send anybody to this guy's brothers who were still alive. He said it would be a waste of time. They wouldn't recognize a miracle. If they can't hear Moses and the prophets, their heart is not ready.
That's where the gulf is. Well, you know, this rich man didn't realize the gulf between him and Father Abraham was still existed between his brothers and them because of where their heart was.
You know, he never said he was sorry.
No.
No. No.
Never.
No.
He wasn't sorry.
Very
He wasn't
good point.
sorry.
Very
Didn't think
good.
he did anything wrong. No, he didn't. He didn't. No. He was sorry he got caught.
Yeah, he was sorry he was thirsty.
Sorry for himself. He was sorry for himself, but he wasn't sorry. And that's a big, huge difference, what you're sorry for. You're just sorry for yourself. You're not sorry.
But unfortunately, Mrs. Eddy explains that, you know, the experience of so-called death doesn't change anything.
No, that makes so much sense. If we were to go to paradise, then we would all kill ourselves. I mean, it makes no sense whatever some of these other teachings. Mrs. Eddy makes so much sense. That's why you know it's true. Did we cover everything, Tom? Did we get the stones? Did you want to tell us anything more about the stones?
Oh, I think this is wonderful. I mean, I'm taken away alive from this, you know, so I hope other people are too.
Yes.
You know,
We are.
I
We
love
are.
these parables. You know, you can talk about them endlessly, and you know, I think that the key thing with the parables is make sure that you don't overcomplicate trying to understand it. But otherwise, you can get a lot out of them. You know.
Yes.
Something for everyone, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you. No, and I know I'm always amazed because we have had this Bible class on this topic before, but there's always new things. Always. It is endless. God provides that fresh and new each time. He's feeding his sheep, his children. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Tom.
Good session.
Thank you.
Recording off.
Thank you.
Goodbye.